folks, this is Open Mic. We are back here and we want to continue our topic today, which seems to focus on the tourism and the appendixes attached to that. Richard, we've just been discussing a minute ago the situation with the possibilities, how the government should address tourism. Can I have your input?
Yeah, Mike, I was horrified the other day. I went to a seminar. I was invited to come to a seminar where the World Bank was putting on, and it was attended by civil servants from across the OECS, largely from ministries of finance and other kind of industries in the front line. And the topic of discussion was incentives. And I sat there and listened to speaker after speaker, including the World Bank people, suggest that the cost of giving incentives to hotels, which we accept we do, almost no hotel pays tax because they've got long-term tax holidays, and now that's been extended. And the cost of these incentives, they were saying, amounts to 4 or 5% of GDP of the country. And the suggestion was that these people, they want to come to your country to make money, and you're giving it away and giving them, so I was fortunately had a chance in the afternoon to say a little something, and when I got that chance, I said, it's so one-sided that it's rather unfair that you didn't invite people from the tourism industry to at least put up a defense. I said, because if you consider it a giveaway, you have to measure it against the impact of the industry on the island. And one hotel alone, which is Sandals, did an impact study, a very in-depth impact study for the impact of their operations in St. Lucia. Very well done. And if properly measured, we're showing that the impact of just the Sandals hotels alone was, equated to 6 to 7%. So I asked the people there, are you prepared to give up 4% to get 7%? I mean, it was a simple math. Now, that doesn't always work the same way. And yes, there are abusers. We know that. But the fact remains, the problem is there is a mindset. There is a problem sometimes carried on by even the foreign multilaterals, the IMF and so on, that the industry, while it is our main industry, is perhaps not contributing enough. And so a lot of our younger people, who for one reason or another, maybe they can't use a beat here or there, have a bit of a negative view of the industry. They see it as more as servitude rather than service. But you only have to look at countries like the Seychelles, Singapore, and you see a complete difference in the way they've approached it. Whether it was the education, whether it was the ability to convince people based on the economic analysis and saying, hey guys, this is giving you jobs, this is providing, it's buying goods. I mean, you see all the signs from Sandals that show what they buy from farmers and so on and so on. And it's real. I mean, it's not imagined. And so to get back to the FDI, we've not had a lot of FDI in the tourism industry, and that's largely because the model that was seen to be flowering during the asset bubble was people coming in here, buying up properties, building condos based on people buying them, and then using them as a resort. When everything collapsed in 2008, all of those collapsed, and so construction was driving that FDI. We haven't had a lot of other hotels coming in, but now we have a couple that are prepared to come in. The one in Rodney Bay, for example, Sandals with the Overwater Suites, and a couple more down south. And so we're beginning to see a renewed interest. And so that's going to be FDI, that's going to be more employment, and that's going to be more tourists to our shores. But we have to, at the same time, we'll never be able to convince everybody that the tourist dollar trickles all the way down to the lowest level. It doesn't, not directly. Indirectly, it does. Because it provides at the end of the year a significant amount of revenue to government, who can then provide the services. But to be able to explain that in a way that people get it is the difficulty. And it's an ongoing problem. We're never going to be able to solve it overnight.
You're so correct. But what they did in the Bahamas, they took the monies that they got from the cruise ships and the other things, and they marked them into lower denominations. Let us say they got in $20 million. They've actually marked them and put in the banks. And they found where the money went to all the different areas, But of course, you see, the thing is that an ordinary person who, let us say, can't afford to build a hotel doesn't understand that.
No.
You see, I've felt for a long time, a hotel is a virtual employment agency. I mean, I have the good fortune or the bad fortune to be involved in a small hotel. And when I see, when you look at Cocoa Palm, I speak for ourselves, we employ about 100 people, and our wage bill is $150,000 a month. You know, and when you see what the people get out of it, it's so nice to see a big happy family. We try to work very closely. We treat them very well. This year we paid out almost $200,000 in bonuses in a difficult period, and I could see the love that people have now for the hotel industry, and hopefully that some of those guys will become can open their small restaurants, or they can supply services. And I see the amount of people I'm talking. So, I mean, at CFL I wasn't directly involved. I was involved overall, and when you saw the amount of checks that we wrote to farmers, it was just unbelievable. Same thing at the hotel, same thing with Sanders. Sanders opposed to all the things. But as you rightly said, if we could just, it's a mindset that has to change. Say, look at me, there is a market, let us do it, you know. Look at with the Taiwan people, the tilapia. If you go to Union, I think the school should be taken there to see what they're doing there. It is unbelievable. And this is foreign exchange being kept right here.
Not only tilapia, orchids.
Orchids,
which is something we could do ourselves, but we never got it off the ground.
But do you know, Fred, that when it started, I went up there, when they were struggling in the initial stage, I said, look at me, for free, bring them to Mega J's. That's when we had, let me say, and the guy said, well, no, it's a government thing, we can't do it that way. And you know, we could push a sale. Martinique could buy all the orchids you want. Yeah.
Cool. No, the key obviously has always been linkages.
Yeah.
And we have to accept that linkages in St. Lucia, for example, between agriculture and tourism have traditionally been low. Maybe 40% of the food, you know, used by hotels comes from locally, whereas in Jamaica it's 70. So it's doable. And the question is, if you could get those linkages and allow tourism, and I go beyond hotels here because there's a lot of other people and providers in the industry dealing directly, you know, with those who provide services, food, etc. That's when they'll understand better. Yeah. But you know, as it stands now,
our time is kind of limited. But I want to ask you one very important question because of your field. The fact that governments are not able to raise money from bond issues anymore, and they have to settle for overdraft facilities to run the country. What are the dangers of this?
Well, that's not in other words, that may be off and on. It's not happening every month.
Okay.
Right? Yes, it's getting tougher and tougher to sell the bonds, and longer, and if being forced to offer the bonds at higher rates just to get people to pay them. But there's a lot of liquidity out there. There's not a problem with liquidity. The problem is the risk. And there was a time in which government instruments were regarded as good as gold. Not anymore. Not after St. Kitts. Not after Dominica. So now the buyers are saying, I want to check around. I'm looking around. I want to go and they buy all the treasury bills. Okay. But they're not buying the bonds. And the bonds is what finances capital expenditure.
But question for you. Based on what I've just asked you and your response to me, tell me something. I know the Prime Minister is concerned about incentives, okay? For instance, you know, one of the reasons why Sanders has not constructed here is because the incentives offered are not within what he wants. That doesn't meet his request. Purely because I personally spoke to Mr. Stewart and asked him, he said, look, here's the situation. I can't afford to pay interest and heavy taxes together. It's one or the other. And until such time that the incentives can be improved, because when you build a hotel and you spend $150 million, you're looking at 15 years. He said, I don't want to be having to pay interest for 15 years and pay tax for 15 years. If one of them can be reduced, then I can go ahead. Now, what is your take on the whole situation? How do you think the government should approach the incentive situation?
Well, actually, to be fair, and I think both governments, because this started even before the present government, but the present government continued it, and they came up with amendments to the Tourism Incentives Act, which allowed extension of tax holidays for an additional 15 years. And so again, Sandals actually got a decent package, and they're kind of one thing away from getting pretty much everything they really think they need in order to afford. So it's not that far off, and we will get the overwater suites.
Okay.
Very close. But it is obvious that the taxation can be a drag on tourism If countries believe that, oh, that because that's the leading sector, I must get most of the revenue from it and try to go directly. If they try and get it indirectly by accepting, if they can do certain things for the industry, they will get the indirect benefits, so more employment, more PAY, etc., etc. That's always the better bet. And I think to some extent they understand that. But the problem governments have right now is money.
Yeah.
Right? And this government has openly said, in a retreat with the private sector and with unions and so on, they need to reduce, they need to be able to bring in like $100 million through a combination of cuts in public sector wages, reductions in transfers, reductions in other public sector expenditure, removal of some of the exempt items on the VAT list, perhaps even VAT on utilities, because without that $100 million, they are going to be faced with a continuing problem to balance their budgets.
Question for you, Richard. It's an old heartache of mine. The necessity to keep all those embassies going. It costs us $65 million a year in embassies, and recently with the introduction of NICE, Proud, Smile, and the consultants, $20 million. Now, that's 60 and 20, $80 million. Now, if we were to say tomorrow, look, we don't need all those embassies. Let us have some honorary councils in those countries, where you give a man a stipend. They're good, they're bright solutions there. And you can save $50 million. I know politically, it's political suicide for the governments, but you know, for a short period, for say 2 to 3 years, we have to bite that bullet and say, look at me, this can't go on. Because in business, there are only 2 ways of succeeding. Increase your revenue or reduce your expenditure. And to me, this is, and Philip here mentioned that anybody coming to him or to his government and saying to save $3 million, he doesn't want to hear that. So I'm saying it to him now. You can save $50, $60 million a year for a short period. At least try it. Give it a shot.
It could be long period, because I noticed the Governor General made some
interesting
comments today about that whole thing. What I would like to see actually is government put out a paper and said, okay, this is the cost of our foreign embassies overseas. Black and white, right? And you know, we accept that there is a need for rationalization so we can cut the costs. Now, there are some people in those positions that obviously might be a little disgruntled. But hey, I'm an honorary consul for Spain and St. Lucia. I don't even get a stipend.
There you go. There you go.
And that's Spain. And when the Secretary of State comes from Spain because he's looking for support from St. Lucia for them to be in the Security Council, I take time off to go and help them out.
There you go.
So I think we can go that route. And we can also go the route of using OECS instead of each island.
Correct.
Absolutely.
We have to take a break. This is Open Mic. We'll be right back.